This playthrough is rated T for teen.
Chapter 4, The Hidden Trap, Los Angeles, December 21st, 1980, 11 a.m. Hyde had trouble getting up again the next morning. He hadn't fallen asleep until nearly dawn. He just couldn't stop thinking about what his mother had said when he called her that night. "Scarlet Star? No, I never heard your father say those words." But Rex had told him with connection, with such certainty. The man had thrown him a real curveball with that one. "Scarlet Star? Your father was the one who knew the most about that." He was so concerned that he'd even tried phoning Sydney late at night. It was well outside business hours, so he got no reply. With the feeling that he still wasn't quite awake, he made himself get out of bed. Then, without even washing his face, he got dressed and took a walk to a nearby park. He sat on a cold bench and just enjoyed the fresh air. For a short while at least, all his troubles seemed to disappear. Hyde remained in that spot for nearly an hour, barely moving an inch. The puddles by his feet were partially frozen over, and the pale winter sunlight felt warm on his cold skin. At last, he slowly rose from the bench and started walking back to his apartment building. When he was at a crossing, he spotted a sign for an estate agent on the other side of the road. He had a quick look in the window to see if there were any apartments he might be able to rent, but none of the places seemed right for him. I guess it's not going to be that easy to find another place. When he got back to Cape West, Betty came rushing up behind him. "Mr. Hyde, hold it right there. I was walking behind you for ages. I tried calling out to you several times, but you wouldn't even turn around." From the moment he had crossed the road and seen the apartment building come into view, all he'd been thinking about was the investigation on the 4th floor. Still, he felt like he should have at least noticed she was there. Guess I'm losing my touch. Betty mentioned that she had already found a new place to live and went on to say, "I'm all set to go on Friday. I'll be here for Christmas, though. After all, I wouldn't want to miss Santa now, would I? If I moved away beforehand, how would he know where to deliver all my presents?" And then laughing, Betty asked, "Do you know who's going to be my Santa this year?" Apparently, Tony had promised to get her a Bella Regina handbag for Christmas. Betty insisted that was the brand everyone was after these days, but Hyde still didn't recognize the name. Could Tony really afford something like that? According to Betty, Tony was going to be coming into some serious money within the next few days. At least that's what he had told her. Hyde cautioned her quite strongly. "I hope you know what you're getting yourself into, Betty. He's set his sights on you. You shouldn't lead him on if you don't care about him." In response to Hyde's frank advice, she casually said, "You don't have to worry about me, Mr. Hyde. Tony knows all too well that he's not my type." And then she changed the subject. "Oh, did you hear the news about the jewelry robbery that happened nearby?" She explained that the jewelers that had been robbed was quite near to the store where she worked. As Hyde recalled, the newspaper had said that a woman in a black cat had been spotted at the crime scene. Hyde asked if she had happened to have seen this woman anywhere around the apartment building, but she hadn't spotted anyone matching that description. Then, presumably feeling that the conversation ran its course, she called out, "Okay, see you later, Mr. Hyde," as she dashed up the stairs. As he watched Betty leave, Hyde wondered what she really thought about Tony. After he had been stood in the lobby for a short while, he got a feeling there was someone behind him. Sure enough, he turned around and saw Max descending the staircase. When she noticed that he was there, Max walked over to him and thanked him for paying his rent. "I want to thank you again, Mr. Hyde. I couldn't ask for a better tenant than a person who pays in full as soon as I ask. Oh, by the way, before we vacate the building, we'll be cutting the power to the rooms that aren't in use. Starting from the 25th, the power to the 4th floor will be cut. I'd like you to refrain from going there." "They're cutting off all the power to the 4th floor? That's pretty awkward for me." He decided to push his luck. Would it be possible to see the rooms up there before the power's cut off? She didn't seem amenable to the idea, however. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Hyde. Those rooms have been out of use for so long that I imagine they'd covered in dust by now. Surely there's no reason why you need to go and see those rooms." She seemed unlikely to even consider it, but he appealed to her regardless. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hyde." He could tell she was growing tired of this. "The 4th floor is strictly off limits to tenants. That's one of the reasons the fire door is installed." "Hold on, does that mean there was another reason?" "One of the wishes of the new owner was that I let the floor untouched," she explained. "They were very clear about that point." But wasn't the new owner planning on demolishing the building? The whole place was being knocked down anyway. It seems odd to ask that the 4th floor be left exactly as is. "Who is this new owner anyway?" he asked her. "For obvious reasons, I can't reveal the person's name." She appeared reluctant to answer his questions, but from the look of things, she wasn't yet at the age where she might leave in a huff. He decided to ask about something else that had him intrigued. "So how come you didn't convert the 4th floor into more apartments in the first place?" She wasn't shy about admitting the reason. "I simply couldn't afford it." Hyde listened patiently as she went on. "When my husband passed away, I used all the money he left me to buy the derelict Hotel Cape West. If the truth be known, times were very tough here at the beginning." Looking at the serious expression on Mag's face, Hyde didn't feel like piling on any more questions on her. After Mags had returned to her room, Dylan appeared with a proposal. If you're interested, I can let you see the rooms on the 4th floor, but you gotta promise me you won't breathe a word of it to Miss Patrice. Evidently, he had overheard the conversation Hyde had just had with Mags. Dylan seemed oddly excited about it, actually. I was sure there had to be some kind of catch, but he did really want to go see the 4th floor. Getting those rooms is a piece of cake for me, but there is something I'd like you to do for me in return. And what's that? I want to hear about Rex Foster. So Dylan must have overheard his conversation with Rex Foster the previous day as well, though not on purpose, he insisted. So you managed to discover that he's an insurance investigator then, said Dylan, and you also figured out that he's been targeting a woman living here. Hyde responded with nothing, more than a hesitant, maybe. But Dylan was confident he was right. You don't have to cover it up. I know what's going on. It's Mary from 206. That's who he's after. Suppose you overheard that too? I knew it. I'm right, aren't I? Dylan smiled to himself in satisfaction. I played right into your hands, didn't I? What can I say, Mr. Hyde? Actually, there's something you need to know. I knew Mary before she moved in here, and she isn't the person everyone thinks she is. This business has just confirmed my suspicions. He explained that when Mary's husband was still alive, he had been to their home to do repair work on some water pipes. He remembered them having a really bad relationship. They were quarreling almost all the time. Then 6 months later, her husband winds up dead. I think that Mary may have had her husband murdered to claim the insurance money. Kyle felt like he was in the middle of a trashy detective novel. So that's what you've been thinking about. You discovered I was a detective, then when you got wind of Mary's husband dying, you thought it'd be fun if you jumped to the conclusion that she must have murdered him in order to claim the insurance money. It's true, I love this kind of thing. You have to admit, it's fun to uncover a secret about somebody. Hyde was getting very sick of Dylan's urge to play detective. Dylan soon reminded him, however, of how this conversation had begun. If you come with me, Mr. Hyde, I'll let you take a look around the 4th floor. Meet me up there at 4 this afternoon. And with that, Dylan went out the front door. Man, that guy's weird. But before he could dwell too long on the subject, his pager started beeping. Rachel was trying to contact him again. Went back to his room, and just as he was about to dial Rachel's number, he noticed there was a message on his answering machine. It's from whoever had given him that order sheet. If you wish to accept my order, please respond in kind. Put a penny in the envelope and leave it in the mailbox, room 404. Wonder whose voice that is. He would have dwelled on the subject at great length, but he was interrupted by his pager once again. Rachel must have something urgent to talk to him about. He called her as quickly as he could. I got some info on Rex Foster that I thought you would like to hear. I made some calls and it seems his reputation precedes him. He's definitely freelance. Plus I found out he's contracted on a commission basis. The rumors about him getting brought in to investigate insurance claims and the insurers ending up not having to issue a payout to the policyholders are also true. Made sense for the companies to use him then, thought Hyde. If his contract was even slightly cheaper than paying out an insurance claim, they'd probably hire him to investigate. Rachel asked Hyde if there was anyone living in this building that seemed like they might be trying to make an insurance claim. Yeah, he replied. A 30-something widow called Mary. We had a chat about Rex Foster, actually. Rachel asked Kyle if he was particularly close to Mary. He explained that he never really planned on getting involved. It just happened. Guess you know what you're doing, she replied. Can't say I trust her, though. Following that, Rachel went over to the information about Hotel Cape West that Hyde was also asked her to find out. The hotel was constructed in 1950 and eventually closed down in 1967. The owner of the hotel at the time was a man called Michael McGrath. On the last day before the hotel closed, a party was held by the owner, and during that party, the owner's wife was murdered on the 4th floor. Her name was Kathy McGrath, and the cause of the death was put down to cyanide poisoning. The person who discovered the body was a hotel employee named Peter Rivet. Rachel read all of this out in her typical business-like fashion. Peter Rivet? That's the same surname as Mary. Hyde made a mental note of this detail, but decided not to mention it to Rachel. Instead, he asked her to find out anything she could about what happened in the hotel 25 years ago. He explained the reason to her slowly and carefully, as if he was repeating it for his own benefit. The mysterious order sheet I received read, "Locate the Scarlet Star, which disappeared at Hotel Cape West 25 years ago." Rachel said that she would find out anything she could, and then hung up. Hyde couldn't stop his mind racing. He kept coming back to that hotel employee with the same surname as Mary, not to mention what Dylan had said about her rocky relationship with her husband. No matter how much he mulled over the facts, he couldn't hold back a growing sense of doubt towards Mary. He ultimately decided he would just ask her all this directly and left his room. She was in her apartment, which meant he had no trouble finding her. She invited him in as soon as she realized it was Hyde. He began by giving her a bit more information about Rex, since he had promised to look into the matter. I found out that device you spotted is part of Rex's handiworks, just like I thought. And worse, this wasn't the only one he'd planted. When he told her about the bug he'd found at Lucky's cafe, she became unable to hide her growing unease.
Oh my, she murmured. Why would he do something like that? What possible reason could he have?
That was what Kyle wanted to know as well. He asked her, what reason could Rex have for investigating Mary? Was there something she was hiding? Was she really telling him the whole truth?
Just what do you think, Mr. Hyde? What do you implying?
She eyed him suspiciously. Hyde wondered, in passing, how his own face looked at her at that moment. I bet I've got my detective face on. He decided now wasn't the time to let up on the questions. Is it true that you and your late husband weren't on the best of terms? Because Rex seems to be convinced that you're perpetrating some kind of insurance fraud.
That's ridiculous, Mr. Hyde. Please tell me everything that Offerman said to you.
Let me be clear, said Hyde. I don't trust the guy, and sure as hell don't believe his story entirely, but I need to get a better idea of the facts from your perspective. I need to know more about when your husband and brother died. He could see in Mary's eyes, expressing all his doubts so bluntly it had struck a nerve. Mary began to plainly recount her tale of the past.
13 years ago, my brother Mike died in a car accident. The brakes on his car failed, and he plunged off a cliff. And after he died, I was truly alone. He was the closest person I had to a parent. The only other person who took care of me like that, what he did was Peter. She went on carefully, selecting each individual word. After her brother Mike died, Peter gave her a document with details of an insurance policy for which Mary was the sole beneficiary. Mike had taken out a policy shortly before he died, so that Mary could live alone and comfortably if anything happened to him. It was worth quite a large sum. The ring Hyde had found for the previous day was also something Mike had left her. However, as she explained, the company that held Mike's policy began to pay out the premium, but before long stopped making the payments. Despite the police investigation concluding that his death was accidental, the insurance company believed otherwise and began their own independent investigation. Mr. Hyde, can you imagine my hardship? I had to endure in order to claim Mike's money, to claim what was rightfully mine. In the end, they couldn't find any evidence of foul play, so she finally received the entire payment. Of course, there were still plenty of people who doubted me, but I just had to endure it. During that trying time, it was only Mike's friend Peter who stood by me, and after the insurance had been paid out in full, Peter and I got married. Mary wore the pained expression of one who would preferred the past to remain buried. I can assure you, Mr. Hyde, fraud is something I would never ever consider. You have to believe me. Don't listen to that rat, Rex Foster. She was practically begging him by this point, but Hyde was undeterred. He knew he had to get the truth out of her no matter what. I wouldn't ask all about all this if I had no intention of listening. If there's anything you've been holding back, now's the right time to let me know. He implored her as strongly as he could, and finally, with a sigh of resignation, she charged to come clean. She married Peter following her brother's death, but an ever-growing part of her wondered if he really loved her, or if he was only interested in her money. Peter used the insurance payout to fund a business venture, and after they started arguing more and more, always about money, once they had spent all the insurance money, Mary decided she would get a divorce. But in an ironic twist, Peter died in a car crash just like her brother had, before she ever got a chance to discuss it with him. In fact, it was eerily similar to the prior incident that the brakes had cut out while he was driving and the car had fallen off a cliff. And just like her brother, Peter had secretly taken out an insurance policy worth a large amount, with Mary as the beneficiary. Mary came under suspicion from the insurance companies once again. But like I told them time and time again, I've done absolutely nothing wrong.
And something about this still didn't quite add up for Hyde. About the incident that happened in the hotel 13 years ago, why did you pretend you didn't know about it when we spoke yesterday? And remember what Rachel had told him? And remembering what Rachel had told him on the phone earlier, he had, especially seeing as your own husband, Peter Reve, was the one who discovered the body of the murdered individual. Mary said nothing. She simply let out a sigh. After a brief pause, she faced Hyde head-on and confirmed what he had been told.
It's true, Mr. Hyde. My husband Peter was the person who discovered the body on the 4th floor, and Mike was there with him.
So, Mary's husband indeed discovered the body, and her brother had been there too.
I'm sorry I lied to you about this yesterday, Mr. Hyde.
Seeing the body apparently affected Mike's mental state quite badly.
I strongly believe that's what's led to his car accident, explained Mary. If he hadn't discovered the murder victim, he would still be alive today. Mr. Hyde, now you know pretty much all there is to know about my past. Please don't make me go through it all again.
Mary seemed very adamant about that last plea. Don't worry about me.
Don't worry about me, she insisted, however. I'll be fine. I'm tougher than I look.
Hyde knew just how much frailty hid behind Mary's valiant words. Now that he thought, he had the strangest feeling that he had heard the same line somewhere before. Suddenly, he realized it was the same thing his mother had told him when they moved to Manhattan after his father died. Mary, it isn't much longer until we have to move out. If you find you need to get anything off your chest in the meantime, give me a call. You listen to what I have to say? Ah, there was the forlorn look at Mary he was used to. Yeah, sure, if you need to talk to someone, he reassured her. At one final point of interest, Hyde asked Mary if she had ever heard her brother or her husband mention the word Scarlet Star. She said that she did remember them use of the word star, and that was some kind of secret code used between the staff of the hotel, and she thought it might have had something to do with the party that was held when the hotel closed down. Maybe that mysterious order sheet comes from someone connected to the hotel too. He made his exit from Mary's room. He didn't know who had sent him the order sheet, but for now he decided to go along with the request to put a coin in an envelope and place it in the mailbox for room 404. To that end, he set out to find a coin he could use. To fulfill the request on the order sheet, he would need a penny, and whenever he needed coins, he had his own special way of getting them. Safe inside his closet was the Pinky Rabbit piggy bank Mila had given him. From time to time, he removed some of the coins from it, but he always did it without actually breaking it. He fished out a small ruler from his sales inventory and carefully inserted it into the coin slot in the back of the piggy bank. He proceeded to move the ruler in just the right manner, and sure enough, some coins came sliding out. Hyde put a penny into the envelope. Room 404's mail slot was covered over with tape, so he peeled it off and then posted the envelope into the mailbox. Before long, he realized it was 4 o'clock, the time he had agreed to meet Dylan. He hurried to the 4th floor. When he got there, Dylan was already waiting for him. "You're on your own, I'm afraid," he said to Hyde's surprise. "I'm not going in with you, but if you know how to get through the door without setting off the alarm, you'll never have to deal with Miss Patrice getting upset if you go in there." Dylan started to explain the trick to getting into the 4th floor. The first step was turning out the fire alarm by flicking the switches in the case on the opposite wall. Then, before opening the door, a lever had to be turned off. It was inside a case on the wall to the right of the door itself. If that lever was disabled, the door would open. There was one more key detail. The knob on the other side of the door was missing, so Dylan warned him that if he let the door close on him, it wouldn't be possible to open it again. However, there was a wooden door stop that could be used to stop it from closing. Once she had finished outlining this procedure, Dylan said, "For now, I'll be in the hallway of the floor below, making sure that nobody tries to come up here. Then once 30 minutes have passed, I'll come and get you. You can just leave after that. I'll reset the lever and disable and reactivate the alarm." And with that, Dylan descended to the 3rd floor. Following the instructions Dylan had given him, Hyde disabled the various switches and opened up the fire door. "So this is the 4th floor, huh? Seems like I heard what was right. It's still just like a hotel up here." He strode along the hallway and stopped in front of room 404. He tried turning the doorknob, and he was in luck. It had been left unlocked. The room had a small damp smell about it, and it contained large tables and chairs in a style that certainly gave the impression they belonged to a hotel room. The layers of dust made abundantly clear that nobody entered this room for many years. As he glanced over the room, his gaze became fixed on some kind of document that had been left on the desk by the wall. He went over to get a closer look. Underneath all the dust, he could see that was a card with a star symbol on it, that he could just barely make it out. It also had the words Hotel Cape West written on it. It appeared to be some kind of invitation. Couldn't really read any of the other text at first, so he took a deep breath and blew all the dust away. The card reads, "We'd like to thank you for your patronage of Hotel Cape West over the years. In an attempt to show our gratitude, hereby invite you to attend a final party to mark the official closure. If you're able to afford the time, we look forward to your attendance on December 10th, 1967. Hotel Cape West." Manager Michael McGrath. It was an invitation to the party that had been held 13 years ago. That night, the manager's wife, Kathy, had been murdered, and the case was still unsolved. Hyde put the invitation in his pocket, suddenly heard a voice shout, "Mr. Hyde, we're almost out of time. You should come out soon." Moments later, Dylan appeared in the room. They left together, and Dylan asked, "How was the 4th floor?" With a warning to Hyde that he should only go up to the 4th floor when no one's around to avoid getting caught by Max. Dylan returned to his own apartment. When Hyde got back to the 2nd floor, he heard a thunderous cry of, "You damn fool!" From further down the corridor, Tony and Frank were having something of an argument. "I'm telling you, I don't know what the hell you're going on about." "Just admit you half-wit." Hyde drew closer and interjected, "Tony, you want to explain what's going on here?" "It's nothing, Hyde. The old fool is just accusing me of being a thief." "He robbed me," shouted Frank. Tony's rage grew ever more visible. "You better stop throwing these accusations around real quick. I don't care how old you are. I'll take this to the next level." Hyde saw the danger in Tony's resorting to violence. Tony, maybe you should calm down a little. If you start throwing your fists around, you're going to regret it later. Holding back a furious Tony, he affected a serious tone of voice. Mr. Raver, I'm not trying to interfere, but you might want to take this discussion elsewhere. Shouting at each other out in the corridor is going to annoy the others. A good suggestion, Mr. Hyde. Tony, this is not over. We'll continue this later. And without further ado, Frank turned and walked away. With Frank gone, Hyde started to try to clarify exactly what happened. Tony, mind telling me what the hell was going on? Was all about? It's his tape recorder. It's gone missing. You know, the one he always carries with him during his strolls? He seems to spend a lot of time walking around muttering stuff into that thing. Tony insisted this was common knowledge amongst the residents, but it was news to Hyde. This is beside the point, of course. Why do you assume you had anything to do with it? We bumped into each other in the laundry room earlier. He was in there before I got there. And you really can't tell me anything else? I already told you. The old fool's just crazy. Anyway, I'm just gonna get out of here for a bit, get some fresh air. Later, Hyde. Tony was gone in a flash. Hyde made his way down to the laundry room where he hoped he could verify what Tony had been talking about. After hunting around for a while, he found the tape recorder sitting underneath the table. Picking it up, he noticed that the casing had a crack in it. Is this the tape recorder that we're getting so up in arms about? He decided there wasn't much in holding on to himself, so he went to return it to Frank. However, when he got up to the third floor and knocked on Frank's door, he was met with only silence. Just then, his pager started ringing. Rachel again. Returned to room 202 for another phone call. Rachel reported the results of her findings. I've unearthed some extra information on Rex Foster. Before he went into insurance investigations, he worked as a reporter. What kind of reporter? Beat. He worked for a magazine called Los Angeles Beat. It was a weekly publication that covered current affairs. Looks like it was pretty classy, too. I had wondered how a reporter for a magazine ended up working as an insurance investigator. Oh, Kyle, what happened with that woman, Mary? I had a talk with her. It doesn't look like I'll be digging any deeper. By the way, sorry to have you working through Sunday, Rachel. No problem. It's no problem. I didn't have any plans anyway. Plus, it's nice to hear your voice. Hyde hung up. He felt it was about time to give Frank another try. When he left his room, however, he noticed that the door opposite room 201, where Tony lived, was open. He peered through the gap. There was a man in there, but he could only see his back. After a moment, he realized it was none other than Frank Raver himself. Hyde crept in silently and asked, "What are you doing here?" Startled, Frank turned around to face him. "This is Tony's room, and I don't see him around." This is Tony's room. I didn't see him around. How'd you get in here? Why are you here? And when Frank didn't respond, he had, "Hey, can you hear me?" "Keep your voice down, will you?" said Frank, crotchety as ever. "I'm not deaf, so there's no need to shout." He explained that he had gone to Tony's room to search for his missing tape recorder, to which Hyde responded, "Tony's short-tempered and short on money to boot, but whatever's wrong with the guy, he's no thief. What makes you think it was him anyway? Isn't it obvious he looks like the kind of person who'd go around lying and stealing? He has a shady past, too." Shady past? Frank clearly knew something about Tony's past that made him suspicious, but what was it? And how had he found out something like that? "Got friends in the police force, Mr. Hyde. One of them told me he was responsible for a pair of violent incidents that caused a lot of pain and suffering. The first time was 5 years ago, and the second 4. He was arrested on charges of theft, but there wasn't enough evidence for the crimes before." Friends of the police force? Are you trying to say that you're an ex-cop? It's about time you pieced that together. I worked on the LA police force right up until I retired. I don't really give a damn if you're a cop once or not, but I strongly recommend you stop assuming people are guilty without gathering all the facts. Tony didn't steal your tape recorder. Hyde produced the tape and recorder from his pocket and handed it to Frank. "I found this on the floor of the laundry room. You just left it there." What? What happened to the case? It's cracked." I guess it must have cracked when it fell off the table and hit the floor. Then Frank started to look more concerned. "Hang on, where's the tape gone?" "I have no idea," said Hyde, bluntly as usual. "This is how it was when I picked it up." Frank expressed his gratitude towards Hyde for finding the tape recorder and made to leave. Hyde called out to stop him. "I'm not interested in your thanks. Maybe you should try giving Tony an apology again instead. Once the tape is safely back in my possession, I shall do just that." And having said his piece, Frank walked out. Hyde had to look around Tony's room. Frank's futile search had left things scattered everywhere. He picked up an envelope that was on the floor. It's just like the envelope that order sheet had arrived in. At the exact same moment, the door opened again. Hyde turned over to see Tony looming over him. He fumbled a quick apology. "Tony, I'm real sorry I came in your room like this. What happened was—" "Don't sweat it," he said, interrupting Hyde. "I just met old man Raver. He told me he found his tape recorder and returned it to him." Yeah, about sums it up. But Frank said that there was also tape inside the recorder and it's kind of missing now. Tony's facial expression did a great job of saying, "Not this again," without him speaking a single word. In any case, it seemed clear that Frank had no grounds to suspect Tony other than his so-called shady past. Yeah, he did say something like that, actually. But I don't know anything about any of the tape. Tony seemed less angry and more dumbfounded. Hyde believed him when he said he knew nothing about it. He turned his attention back to the greater mystery in his life, the order sheet. "By the way, did you leave a letter in my door a little while back?" "A letter? Nothing to do with me. I've never even considered writing you a letter, man." Tony's reply came instantly. As he continued, though, he blushed a little. "I mean, I write letters from time to time, just not to you. I write them to Betty. We've got this plan for us to give each other presents at Christmas. Problem is, I can't seem to get the wording right." Hyde asked him where he got the writing paper and an envelope. "What, this stuff? Dylan gave it to me, but I forgot about that. You want to hear my latest songs? My thanks to you?" "I think I'll take a rain check on that. I've got a few things I need to sort out." With no further desire to give Tony any further opportunity to self-promote, he rushed out the door. While the matter was still fresh in his mind, he decided to visit Dylan on the third floor. Lo and behold, Dylan was coming down the stairs just as he was heading up them. Hyde got straight to the point. "Did you give Tony some letter paper and an envelope?" "Yeah, that's me, all right." Did you send me a letter using that stuff?" Dylan smiled in a slightly patronizing manner, as if to say that Hyde wasn't quite thinking this through. "Why would I be writing you letters? If I have something I need to say to you, I'd rather just come to your room and say it." It was a valid point. "Just out of interest, then, where'd you get them from?" "I got them as a present from Miss Patrice for all my hard work." "Why are you asking anyway?" "It's nothing. I was just thinking about something." "Then why not pay a visit to Miss Patrice and ask her directly?" "In fact, I was on my way there. Shall we pay her a visit together? I have to return something I borrowed from her." And thus Hyde went with Dylan to visit Max's apartment. They only had to wait a few moments after knocking before she opened the door. "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to see the both of you. Is there something I can help you with?" Dylan piped up. It's nothing special. We just bumped into each other as we were heading here. I came over to return these to you." He handed her a bunch of keys and then left, giving Hyde a quick nod. "They're the spare keys to the apartments," he explained to Max. Dylan occasionally has need to borrow them from me. It's necessary for when he's doing certain types of maintenance. Anyway, Mr. Hyde, to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Did you give Dylan a letter set?" he asked her. He followed up with a question about whether she had used the writing paper recently. It was evident from Max's reaction that she didn't know what he was talking about. Then, with a start, it dawned on her. "Oh, yes, I remember now. Yes, I did give him a letter set. Why, Mr. Hyde, would you like one too?" "If that's the case, I'm going to have to disappoint you. That last one I had, if you're really keen on it, was on one, though I believe they're only on sale on the local drugstore." Hyde was disheartened to learn just how common this particular stationery was, but he had to ask his next question just in case. "Have you left a letter at my door recently?" Just as he expected, she had done no such thing, leaving aside the closure note, of course. Turned out that she had another matter to raise with him, however. "Oh, actually, there was something else. Mr. Wolf from room 201 has promised to settle his rent after all." "Tony said that, did he?" "He did. He called me earlier to assure me that he'll be settling his debt soon," she said, smiling. Back in his room, the order sheet was all he could think about. "Is this person who sent it to me someone who lives in this building?" By 9 o'clock, he was almost sick of thinking about it, and he had still been unable to deduce anything further. For want of any better ideas, he decided it was time to pay another visit to the fourth floor. He opened up the fire door and walked along the hallway before heading straight into room 404. He was stopped in his tracks by the unsuspecting presence of someone else in the room. It was Frank. "Everything? Evening, Mr. Raver. What brings you all the way up here?" "And just how has that got anything to do with you?" he just said sharply. Frank's reaction was rather aggressive, perhaps due to the surprise of Hyde's sudden entrance. Frank asked him the same question, and aware of the fact that he was breaking the rules just as much as Frank was, Hyde made up an excuse. "Kind of stumbled up here, and didn't take me long to see the fire door was open. Thought Dylan must have been inside, so I poked my head in." When he asked Frank again, the man explained that he had similarly come up here, found the door ajar, and gone inside to investigate. "I thought that someone had forgotten to close the door. I'm going to have to give Dylan a piece of my mind when I see him." He left the room without another word. Hyde had learned that day just how conscious the other residents were of Frank's comings and goings. His tendency to wander the halls at all hours had apparently become quite the source of local gossip, not to mention the tape recorder that he carried with him. everywhere and muttered into on a constant basis. Behind his back, he seemed to be described as an old man with too much time on his hands and nothing better to do than prowl around, and sometimes, as in Tony's case, it wasn't quite put so delicately. But in Hyde's estimation, there was more to it than just that. Frank was searching for something, and Hyde wanted to know what it was. Hyde examined every corner of the 4th floor, but nothing jumped out at him, as being the obvious owner. Just as he had come back to room 404 to check over it one last time, Tony entered behind him. They both reacted in unison. "Tony, what have you come up here for?" "Hey, Hyde, what are you doing all the way up here, man?" Hyde lied to Tony just as he lied to Frank and said that he'd been taking a late-night stroll. Now isn't that weird?" replied Tony. "That's the same reason I'm here." This is going to be a popular hangout, Hyde half grinned to himself as the thought occurred to him. Didn't seem like he'd get much more time to himself on the 4th floor tonight. While Tony was there, he thought he'd try to clear something up. "Tony, let me ask you something. You call Mags to tell her the rent's coming soon. Also, Betty's thinking you're going to buy her a snazzy Christmas present. Where's all this money coming from?" Tony's face turned pale. With a sense of panic about time, he urged Hyde to leave right away. "Please just turn around and leave, will you? If you don't take my advice, things could turn up nasty up here." "Nasty for who?" "The guy who's always walking around up here." "You mean Dylan?" asked Hyde. Tony shook his head. "Well, who do you mean then? Come on, Tony, tell me." "Get back to your room." Tony was becoming more agitated by the second. "If you're here when he turns up, my plans will go disappear in a puff of smoke." Hyde wasn't prepared to let this lie, and what plan is that? Tony didn't respond straight away, and when he finally did, it was more of a muted tone. "If I let you in on this, you're going to know how useless of a human being I am. Tony, you're not a worthless human being, and if you're so sure that whatever you're about to go through with this will soil your name, then just stop what you're about to do and leave." Tony put his head on the hands and just stood there for a while, deep in thought. At last he reluctantly spoke. "Hyde, I was planning to have him meet me up here so that I could make him a deal he couldn't refuse. I've seen him come here over and over again. He's always going up to the 4th floor at night." "Hold on, don't tell me this is Frank Braver you're talking about." "Yeah, it's him, all right. He goes to the rooms of the 4th floor, muttering to himself like a crazy person, while he's searching every inch of the place like, well, a crazy person. And he's always holding that tape recorder he loves so much. So I thought, if I could just hear the contents of that tape, I'd know what he was after." "Tony, I'm not sure you realize what kind of person you're messing with." Hyde relayed his earlier conversation with Frank, where he had found out that the man was a retired LAPD detective and was suspicious of Tony because he knew about his dark past. "Figures," Tony said. "But resigned. Now, so now you know all about me." Hyde still felt he should try to clear up the details. "Tony, where's Frank's tape?" I've got it somewhere safe. I was planning on returning it to him if he could meet my price. Can't believe I've been such a fool. Such a damn fool." He hit himself on the head a couple of times. Then Tony admitted to Hyde that he had twice been involved in a violent instance when he had hurt people. The first time was when he had just started seeing some financial success as a musician. He beaten up his manager when he found that the man had wasted all the money he'd made from one of his concerts. The second occurred when a dedicated young fan of Tony's who had remained so even after the first incident got into a fight with a hoodlum. Tony sent the latter to the hospital. As big as a deal as the first incident was, the fact that a second incident happened was something society would never forgive him for. Tony was still young at the time and hadn't understood that. After that, he got stuck in a rut. Nothing seemed to go right for him, and he started to feel desperate. Since then, all my efforts have amounted to next to nothing. The record company even severed my contract. I really am worthless, you know. I just can't see it being like this. If you can see that this isn't the right way to live your life, then change. Hyde knew that Tony could escape this situation if he only tried. If you really make an effort, you'll get there. Plus the past behind you and start living a better life. You're right, Hyde. Everything you just said. Maybe I can change after all. A smile returned to Tony's face. "Oh, yeah, and Hyde, you don't mind giving this tape back to the old man, do you?" Tony handed him a cassette tape. Hyde was instantly curious to find out what was recorded on it. When he got back to his room, he decided to give it a listen before he returned to Frank. He took the tape out of the answer machine, replaced it with this one, then pressed the play button. The man's voice started coming out of the tiny speaker. Investigation memo 0083. The state of the 4th floor is just as it was 13 years ago. No doubt about it, this was Frank's voice, albeit calmer than Hyde was used to. My initial sweep of room 404 with Kathy McGrath's body was found is complete. Before vacating this building, I must find the lost items that connected with Condor. The usual beep of the answer machine followed and the tape stopped playing. Kathy McGrath? Took a moment before he made the connection. She was the victim of the murder that had occurred 13 years ago. It seemed that her body had been found in room 404 on the 4th floor, so Frank had been investigating the murder in some fashion. What does he mean by lost items connected with Condor? As ever, his mind was abuzz with unanswered questions. Alright, time for the classifieds of this chapter. Oh, there we go. Notes concerning Kyle Hyde's Part 4, Kyle's Unique Talents. This is an anecdote from the time when Kyle Hyde was serving as a detective in the New York City Police Department's 89th precinct. The stakeout is said to be one of the key methods of investigation for the police department. It involves closely watching a street in the hopes of noticing a clue or a piece of evidence that could lead to the case being solved. Back then, all-night stakeouts were a regular part of Kyle's everyday life. He watched all kinds of people, from violent criminals to witnesses. He stayed at all kinds of places for all kinds of reasons. The methods of communication available to a police officer during a stakeout were limited. They were generally able to use the radio in the car, but in cases where they wasn't possible, the officers could rely on contacting HQ and receiving timely assistance. It was common for the men on the stakeout to have only their own abilities and judgments drawn. Dennis Sachs, a colleague of Kyle's at the time at the New York NYPD, told me about one such situation. Yeah, we were often put on stakes out together. Normally Hyde would always had this sense about him, like his mind was somewhere else. But the second we went to action, the real Kyle Hyde appeared, and believe me, he had some balls. It was kind of weird, actually. Whenever we had to make a decision about when to step in, he just made it. No hesitation whatsoever. Not to mention all the times he ran after someone. It was like, whoosh! All of a sudden, he was off, and nothing was going to stop him. Did large-scale stakeouts a lot, too. We'd be split up into teams, set up into different places around the building's perimeter. We'd have a signal the teams would use to communicate with each other. This one time, it was Hyde's turn to decide what the signal should be. Normally, he'd use our cars for a signal. We'd flash the headlights in a particular way, but not this time. No, this time the signal involved those with dead electrical flashlights we used in our investigations. I decided we'd use Morse code and transmit it through those with tiny little red lights. Right away, all the guys complained that it was going to be too annoying to use, but in the end it helped us catch someone. From then on, the system he thought of using those flashlights was what the 89th precinct used on all their stakeouts. At the time, Kyle told Dennis Sachs that he had learned Morse code in the Boy Scouts, which his mother had forced him to join. Oh, that reminds me. One time Hyde messed up and forgot his flashlight. We were watching from a room opposite the building we thought was the criminal's hideout, and he used the light in the room for the signal instead. He just kept turning it on and off. Now, of course, the sign is obvious that was going to be seen by the guy we were staking at as well. Thanks to Hyde, the suspect got away. That's just the kind of guy he was. He pulls stupid stunts like that every once in a while. That was the most important detail I gleaned from Dennis's story. Kyle Hyde is the type of man who pulls stupid stunts from time to time. During my research, I learned about various further incidents where Kyle did just that. I shall now recount two such incidents. First took place 13 years ago when Kyle was just a 21-year-old university student. It was summer, and although I was not aware of the circumstances that led to this particular event, Kyle had bet his friends that he could swim all the way around Manhattan Island. And sure enough, though, it was a distance of approximately 29 miles and it took him 10 hours to do it. Kyle won the bet. No one had seriously believed he could do it, so naturally they were all very impressed. He became an overnight campus sensation, the university's even a very own celebrity for that entire summer, and yet Kyle never did any long-distance swimming ever again. The second incident took place when Kyle had been working for Red Crown for just over half a year. He was getting used to his new life, receiving stock from Ed and going door to door to try and sell it. One day, the product he had to sell was a grabber. It was a device that started off folded up quite small, but if you squeezed the handle, it extended so you could use the tongs on the end to pick up items at a short distance away. It was a useful tool and actually rather popular at the time, so Kyle set out the day with a dozen of those grabbers to try and sell as many as he could. However, by the time evening came, his inventory had not depleted at all. It wasn't that he had been slacking off. In fact, he had knocked on 100 doors over the course of that day, which is that he couldn't sell a grabber to any of the people who lived in those particular houses. He didn't know precisely why this product wasn't selling, but from that day on, Kyle drastically reduced the number of doors he knocked on. Today, the average number of houses he visits in one day is 3. Alright, next time will be Chapter 5.